All right, welcome everyone to this first lecture of scientific work for Orba. I'm Kai. Some of you might know me from Monday, where you joined me in AIBDS one. Maybe everyone, but I'm not sure if you all are taking AIBDS one. So if then welcome back. So um, we're gonna have a mellow introduction to that course also, as I said. So we're gonna, so this course is designed to actually introduce you to some core topics or strengthen them. Not really introduce you, but strengthen them to bring you all on the same level. We are a master study of many people, right? Many people from all over the world, which is really great. We love it. However, there are some challenges we have to overcome. So there are a lot of people coming from different educational backgrounds, different universities. They all had different programs. So we try to use this, and this is why it's also mandatory. Like this is basically the only mandatory thing. Like you can choose of all the other things, but this one is mandatory, right? So this one you have to do basically because it covers the basics. And as you might seen in e-learning, it seems a little bit more complicated than other lectures. So the normal lecture, there's one lecturer, like for example, AIBDS one, it's me. So you will see me all the time in AIBDS one. However, here, everyone in Orba is doing this. So the purpose of that is the purpose of that is that you get to know everyone, which is great. So from the beginning, you will be one group, you get to know each other. And so before I'm starting to give you some administrative information, because they're very important since this course is a little bit special, um, I want to say that I want to basically welcome you as new Orba students, since I assume most of you are new Orba students that have to take the course, and I want to warmly welcome you to this master program. We will have a lot of fun, obviously. You will see me at several points, hopefully. You will see also my other colleagues at some points. So it will be great. And we hope to give you a very good education. Like this is our goal throughout your master study. So we hope you're hyped. We certainly are. Like we are always hyped for the new students. And we also try to improve every semester. And some of these improvements went also into this course. So last year we had this course for the first time. And while the topics of the course went great, the organizational things were a little bit overwhelming for us and also for the students. So we tried to make it easier. And I will inform you in a second on what we actually, not what we changed, because you don't need to bother what was last time, but what is only valid for you now. And it's way easier now. But I still want to give you the small heads up. Yeah. So it's very important to say that we kind of choose to have the first lecture. So my part, as you can see, this whole lecture series, so the whole semester, is divided into 5 parts. Okay, you have seen this in e-learning. Like for each part, this is like a separate small page for each part. This is very important because each colleague, the topics are very different, so we handle it differently. Okay, so each of us has one part. And the first part, which is my part, so this is where we are, part 1, literature review. It's probably the easiest part, so we can like talk and chat, and it will be very easy. But it's also very important because I will say something about the rationale in a few minutes. But so just because it seems easy, people tend to forget it, and then but you need it throughout the whole master thesis. You need it for your seminars, you need it for your scientific project, and you need it for the master thesis. So if you ignore this, that will be very bad. Like you need to work your way around literature, like to review literature, to know where you are. So this is very important. But of course, we have other parts besides this part. And as I said, this part is online, as you can see, like we are online. And if you watch on demand, like also I record this so people can watch later. So this is valid only for my part. This is very important to stress it out. Not the whole lecture series is online, just the first part, because a lot of students arrive late due to visa issues, right? And we try to accommodate them. We try to say, hey, we understand this. There are students from all over the world, and it's not a smooth sailing with the officials giving out visa and stuff like this. So we try to accommodate you by providing the first 3 lectures online, right? And if you need any information, please consult the e-learning. Like the e-learning has a general section where we have a syllabus, where you have all appointments with who's doing it, where it is taking place. Study this, right? This is the correct template to know where you have to be at which time. Okay. Since also we have basically 2 appointments, like we have one on Tuesday and one now, or one on Wednesday, I'm not sure again, but of course only one of them is valid. So if you say I'm totally confused, just look in the table and you know exactly where to go when. Okay. This is why we have the syllabus table in the e-learning. You know, okay, this date, this time, this person. Okay, this is the easiest way. So today, if you look up the syllabus, we have Zoom online, of course, and it's me at this time. Okay, great. So the problem is the LSF. I know a lot of people think the LSF is the thing to go to, and it actually is, but we can actually rarely put information in there. So you see 2 rooms and it's very complicated. You don't know where to go. This is why we have the opportunity in e-learning. We have the opportunity to provide you with more and detailed infos. Like the LSF, I actually don't like it because it's like we cannot put infos in there. Like this is just like it's supposed to help the students, but sometimes it's confusing them. If we have a more complex model where some is online, some is in person, it's very confusing. So please study the table in the e-learning. Like a general, only look at the e-learning. I would suggest it for this lecture, right? For other lectures, I cannot speak, but for this lecture, the e-learning is your place to go. So we will start with part 1, then part 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. And then part 5 will be held by Marlon Ulmer. This is a little special. So parts 1 to 4, because they will be assessed differently. So in the past, we had a lot of exams and also exams already in October, I think. And it was strange. Like it was very complicated also for you. So we have done it the easy way. So to pass this course, which is of course the utmost interest of you, you have to do 2 things. Okay, 2 things only. First, there is an exam of this course called Scientific Work for ORBA in the regular exam period where you register during the regular exam registration time. So this is the same for all your other lectures, right? You just register, say, hey, I need to take a part in that lecture, okay, in that exam. So this is the first one. Like this is in the regular exam period. And the second one is the hand-in for part 5. So of course, part 5 is LaTeX. So what you do is you write something in LaTeX and it will be checked. This is just the pass or not pass, basically, right? So this is the part by Marlon Ulmer. And when you visit his lecture to part 5, he will give you details on that, right? So it's basically you just prepared, like I think, for 1 week and then you're done with it, right? So it's before the exam, before this exam, right? But part 1 to 4 will be in this exam. The exam will be a regular 60-minute exam, right? So there are 4 parts in a 60-minute exam. So I don't know how many questions. So I'm not gonna answer that. We don't know either, but it will be 60 minutes only. So it's doable, right? Okay, all right. And this is what you have to pass, right? This is it. So it's not as complicated as it used to be, where we had 4 exams and 5 exams. You have to pass all of them, and then the grades of the 4 best are take. Like this was it was way too complicated. Okay. So now it's easy. 1 exam in the regular period, like you had registered like every other exam, and then just listen to what Marlon Ulmer tells you, Professor Ulmer tells you in part 5. Okay, that's it. Easy. Okay, if you have questions later on, you can ask, of course, about this. But this is the basic, and I hope this is understandable. So again, I summarized the most important points here. Only part 1 is online. Like Professor Lucas, you will join him in person in the room, right? So only my part is online. You see a schedule of my appointments. I have a schedule page where there are the Zoom links and what we were gonna do, right? So for example, we will only have 2 Zoom lectures, and the one lecture, so every one of these contains of 3 lectures basically. Mine contains of 2 lectures and a reading at home task. Now you think, why don't you give us 3 lectures? Well, because guess what? A literature review has to do with reading, right? And so I don't want to take double your time, right? If I have a third lecture and then let you read all the things, that would be too much workload for you. So what we do is we have 2 lectures, one today and one at the end, and in between you're going to read stuff. Sounds good? I think this is okay and this is fair to give you like the time to not have a lecture, but then you need to read it, and then we will speak about it in the last lecture, right? Okay, but this is also you see it in the schedule, right? You see in the schedule today we meet, then there is reading at home, and then we meet again on October 30. Okay, perfect. Like if you have questions, please check the e-learning first. All the information is there, right? If you find a mistake there, you could write me a mail. I will try to check it out. Like sometimes we make mistakes in the syllabus because it's hard to organize it with 5 professors. So sometimes we struggle a little bit amongst ourselves, but usually this should work. Okay, I see the students that went to the actual room are joining now, maybe. Okay, but again, you can read this information. It's all online. I've uploaded the slides as PDF, so you have the slides. This will be recorded, so no problem. Okay, so these were just some general information. Are there questions regarding organizational stuff first? Like I want to put a pin in that and say, hey, we've covered that, right? And then we can move on to the content. Are there any questions regarding the organization of this lecture? If you have some other questions, you can also like send me an email, or you can ask me at our third appointment, right? So there's no rush in doing it now. As I said, there are no exams coming up. This is an exam in the regular period. Everything easy, and the part 5 will be in January. Okay, perfect. Then let's go on. So why are we talking about literature? I know this is a course about operations research and business analytics. So why don't I teach you some calculus or other stuff? Actually, Professor Alva Lucas will teach you that. But what we are talking about is a general way of scientific work, because it's different than just writing a story. And so what we're talking about is how you conduct yourself when you write a paper, being a term paper, being a report, be it your master thesis, be it your scientific project, your master seminar, and you have to do all these things. Like you have to do a master seminar, you have to do a scientific project, and you have to write a master thesis. So you cannot escape this. So there is no way you could just say, I don't want to do this, but you have to. And you will learn quite a lot, because what I want to build this not like, okay, we have this. There will be a little bit of that at the beginning, so it will be quite boring maybe today. This is why we only will do 60 minutes today, because you have a lot of boring stuff to listen to. But I want to enable you. Like this is the basic concept. I want you to be able to know what to do and where to get information, right? I just don't want to nitpick stuff for you and to say you have to do it like that and this will always be perfect, because this never works. Like you have to learn how to adjust yourself. And this is the same for writing papers. There are different types of papers you can write. I just mentioned a few: a master thesis, a scientific project, a technical report, and they will all be different. Like the master thesis is probably the most difficult. It has it has more theory. You have to go through more literature. You have to maybe you have to create maybe a theoretical grounding, maybe even hypothesis. Or if you do an OR project, you will also have to scan the literature on how did previous people solve this problem. If you have an OR problem, like a routing problem, if you go to Marlon Ullman, you're very fascinated by pizza delivery and cool stuff like this, and he does really cool state-of-the-art stuff. But you need to see where it comes from. Like what has been done before, what can I do? And this is identifying a gap for you to sit in and write your paper, right? So this is the one thing, and this is what actually the literature review does, right? It positions your research within the research world. And if you forget everything today, I'm not mad, but what you need to remember is, and I really say that, and I say that with all that is really important, right? This is very important. Now, if I would have drawn lightnings to to get you to know this. You will not ever write a paper for me or anyone here that starts on a blank page. Like that starts as nobody has done anything like this before. This is not what you will do. This is stupid and it's superfluous and it brings no one anything. Like if there are 5 papers that have done the same thing that you have done, why do it again? Why do it the 6th time? This is not how science works, or we would all be in the Stone Age inventing the wheel again. You know this thing, reinventing or inventing the wheel again? This is exactly what we can't have. We have to see what has been done to develop it, to bring it further, right? Of course, bringing it further in a master thesis doesn't mean you make a Nobel Prize contribution, maybe, but you have to have a small contribution, or you discuss something, right? You show us something, or you do an actual literature review paper that summarizes literature, say, hey, there are blind spots. So you have the opportunity to show other researchers, hey, this could be research. These are all contributions to the research field, right? So, but the main fact is you have to position yourself in the research world and not assume that what you will do, that your idea hasn't been done before. So don't assume that what you have in mind or what anybody has in mind has not been done before and start from scratch. Never do that. Okay? This is the main message of the first part today. Okay? And how can we circumvent this? Well, you guessed it, we do a literature review, right? So what are our learning goals for this first part today? And these will be the main goals for today. Learning goals 1 to 3. So you see, I sometimes use learning goals to really see, hey, where are we at? So the first is, hey, what the hell is a literature review, right? And why do we need to do it? Like I gave you some idea on why we need to do it. But the first thing is to say, hey, what actually is it? What do we actually do, right? What are our results? And it depends, but we will talk about this. And then what types are there? Like there are many types of literature reviews. We will only go through some, right? We will not go through all. And now, as you can see, and this is an important part of material, besides what I say, besides the slides, of course, you need to read. Well, for literature review, you need to read. So, and when I put this read here, then these are the papers that belong to these goals, right? So I connect the goals with the reads. Now you need to read all the papers that I gave you anyway, right? So it doesn't matter, but this just shows you where they belong to in terms of the plan of the lecture, okay? However, you need to read every paper. So there are 7 papers, you need to read all of them, okay? This is given. It's a literature review, you need to read all of them. Like you don't need to read them, you can leave some of them until the end of the semester, I guess, but I would suggest like the basic ones you should read. Like these ones you should read. Okay, so, and I will tell you where they belong and what are the examples of and so on. Okay. So before we even start with the literature review, because the literature review is actually the second thing we want to talk about, right? But the first thing is something that I want to like scoop in, which I assume you know. This is why I will only spend little time on that, right? I will spend little time on that. I will have an example prepared for you. I will just have a nice example for you that we will show later. Okay, let me just share another screen real quick so that you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Now what you see, right? What you see here, what you see is a paper. It's a paper. It's written by me and some colleagues, so I use this paper so to give you an idea on why we do this, right? Not necessarily want to teach you how to write a paper, but I want to show you why we, for example, why do we cite here, right? So why do we cite here? What's the point of this, right? And how it's structured and how papers are usually structured and why we cite and where the literature review goes actually in, okay? So now when I talk about a literature review, right? I can talk about two things. The first thing is that I actually mean the second section of a paper. It might sound weird that I specifically say the second section. Usually it is the second section or the beginning of the paper, right? It starts with an introduction, a paper, and in the introduction, there's the problem, like blah, 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 this is the problem. And you can see that in the problem, we already, right, we already try to show that this problem is relevant by citing people that have found that this problem is relevant, right? So you see, we already are convinced. So this has nothing to do with the literature review. This is basic citing. Like if you write a sentence and you want to convince people in a scientific paper that this is important, right? Or that there have been some findings in this area that push this area and makes it an interesting find or an interesting area to be discussed, you need to put sources there. So don't think a scientific paper is just you writing stuff that you made up. This is absolutely opposite of this, okay? So this is just how you cite, right? And this is very important. Like you need to find when you have an argument, you need to back up that argument with scientific references, right? And this is the introduction. So, but in the introduction, we actually don't have a literature review. Like we might put in some literature, but the review is actually to say, hey, what has been done already, right? So here we have a theoretical foundation. So we say, hey, what has been done already? So we have a theoretical foundation that says, hey, what is it actually that we do? So this is like what you would in a master thesis write about, like what's the basis of my work, right? And we then can find some ideas. And in this paper, what we even do is, so you can see, we discuss findings here. So we did a literature review here of the theoretical basis, and then we use the literature to actually build hypotheses. However, this paper, the whole paper itself is not a literature review. So going back to what I meant is there are two types, there are two things when I talk about a literature review. The first thing is this second section. Like the second section or the third section doesn't have to be the second section, but in the first part of the paper, after the introduction, you're gonna position your paper within the literature realm, right? And you will do a literature review. So you see this very often in OR papers. Like in our field, OR and business analytics, if you have a paper that, for example, says, hey, I have a new algorithm to do stuff, they surely will have in the second or third section after the problem description, hey, how has this problem been solved until now? And what are the problems with these solutions? And how am I gonna address this? This makes absolute sense. So you show introduction problem. Why is it a problem? What we're gonna do? So this is a short summary. Then you introduce the problem usually in the more formalized way. And then you review the literature, how this problem has been solved until now, which positions you in the middle of this and say, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. Like I'm gonna improve this, right? And this is the first when I'm talking about a literature review. So this is where the paper is actually itself not a literature review. Sometimes what you can do, and this is what we will talk about in the lecture, is that your whole paper is a literature review. So it means you review a lot of literature and you summarize facts and you basically describe what's going on out there, and then you can go even further depending on the time on the literature review. But the important takeaways here is literature review, you have to do either in a paper that is not a literature review, for example, an OR paper, you build a new algorithm, whatever, when you want to position your research. And the second thing is you really want to summarize the research or a whole research area, then you have to dedicate the whole paper to it. It's then called a literature review paper, right? So these are the two things when I talk about literature. But this has nothing to do with that you always, no matter what you write, always have to use citation to give credit to the authors that say something. This is also important. Like when you read a paper and you are being expected to read papers, to give credit to them and say, hey, they found that out. They found that out, right? So, for example, I'm gonna take this sentence here, right? Let's take this example and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. The yellow marked example sample, right? This is just for citation reasons. I want to explain to you why it's so important. So this sentence, to better understand the interplay between decision makers' task performance and AI causing potential unintended consequences. So here Micallef et al. 2022. So this is the short citation, and if I click on it, I will jump to the reference section where there's the whole reference, and then I can look it up, right? So, but this is how we usually cite. And the format on how this is given depends. It depends on how the journal where you publish or how the professor where you give in the master thesis wants it to do. Like there are different styles of doing it. For example, some have just numbers here, and some have like the names, and some have other formulations when it's 2, 3, or more authors. So we won't bother with that. Like the format is usually given by either the professor where you hand it in or either the journal where you publish. So you don't have to bother with it. Just need to adhere to the format. Okay. So to better understand interplay between decision makers' task performance and AI causing potential unintended consequences. So this says, okay, we know now that the interplay we know that there are some unintended consequences of AI use in the interplay. So Micallef et al. Said this. This is why we put it here after that. And this is not a direct citation, right? So we basically summarized what this paper says, or part of this paper says, right? And we gave it in our own words. If we cite directly a sentence from that paper, then we have to put it in quotes, right? We have to put it in quotes and then put the source and the page also behind it usually, right? So here we can do it without the page. Okay, and then we turn to a more human-centric view of the problem by focusing on the decision-making process itself. So, and this paper says that how the decision-making process works, right? So, and so we can assume that this paper says, hey, the decision-making process or human-centric view is more wanted in information research. And why is this important? Because we are still in the introduction. So the introduction uses more general statements where say, hey, we have to look at this, and these are cool things, and maybe some editorials, but I won't go into large details here, right? I just want you to know you have to cite this and don't be lazy about this, because for us, this is the easiest way to spot if you've done your work or not, right? If you have like bad sources, and yeah, don't get me started on using ChatGPT for this kind of stuff. Like I spot it immediately because I use a lot of ChatGPT for a lot of things, but I don't use it to write my scientific papers. Like I use it. I don't use it to like put in the sources. It's immediately apparent, but we will talk about Gen AI in the last lecture where I have some advice on how you can actually use it, because I don't want you to like, it's not forbidden and you should actually use it, but how to use it, how to critically use it, how to critically question what it puts out, I will show you. Okay. So don't worry about this. Okay. So this was just to get, hey, what are we actually wanting to produce and why we need to cite. So we're going back to the slides now. Let me just do the old switcheroo here. Okay, we go back to the slides now. Hope you can just check if you can see it. Yeah, you can see it now. We're back with the slides. So here you have a summary of what I just told you, right? So this is a summary of how you do it. This is like something you need to keep in mind, right? I specifically actually know that a lot of you have done this already, but I still want to remind you, like we don't. And a general advice. I will try to give some practical advice. We have a section dedicated to practical advice for literature review that we will speak about in the lecture on October 30. However, one general advice: if you want to get good, yeah, like the gamer says, the thing to get good is to watch people do it. Like read good papers. Like in OR and business analytics, we have a top tier journal called Management Science. They have open access paper you can read. You also might be able to get like an access over university and read all their papers. Like we have access to it, I think, but I'm not entirely sure that we have access to all articles. But if they are open access, you will have access to them. Read these articles. Like don't like try to understand what's in them, but try to read the introduction. How do they formulate it? Do they catch you with it? And then how do they write the related work section? The related work section is the literature review section when you have no dedicated literature review paper, right? So this is one of the two things I just told you, what literature review means. So the embedding of their work in the whole context of the research. This always needs to happen, and this always does happen in these journals. So you can pretty much read some good papers, and I have some examples of literature reviews, but I cannot give you like 10 or 20 examples of paper because I cannot force you, and do not want to force you to read all of these papers. So you have to find papers of your field of interest. So if you're interested in reinforcement learning, read papers from management science that deal with reinforcement learning. If you want to find out if you have some human AI connection, you want to do experiments, like for example with me, then you read experimental studies from management science. Like this journal has it all. Okay. And it's always very, very good. Like the papers that you can download, they went through 2 years minimum, 1.5 of 2 years, maybe even 3 or 4 years of peer review. That means other experts have criticized this paper to the moon, and then people have just adjusted, and everybody worked together on top of the people that authored the paper. So it's a collaborative effort to get the best out of the paper. So this ensures that the end product is really worth reading. And if you want to get good, don't bother with like some stupid papers, but read the good ones, the really good ones. Why start here when you can start up here, right? This is a reminder that we do not expect management science papers from you. However, if you read them, you will become better at writing this. You will become better at putting things like making things short and comprehensive and on point. This is also a lot of students like they just blabble about the same thing over and over, and it's very boring. And so you need to learn that. But you learn it faster if you read good papers, okay? So this is just before we start, right? So this is just some general thing I want to tell you, okay? So, okay. Now, we start now by having a look at what is a literature review, right? So I have all these boring quotes here, but basically, it's important that it has two aspects. The first aspect is it integrates research findings and all types of research findings. Now we will see in the types later on that if we stick maybe with one type of findings, like qualitative or quantitative findings, we can use other methods. Specifically with quantitative, we can use some numerical methods actually, but usually it's more like looking at it from a qualitative point of view because we analyze text, right? So it's hard to do always a purely quantitative integration of these findings. So it's to integrate research, like to see what people are up to, what people have spoken about, what terms they use, how it's also how you can connect it together, right? And specifically challenging is when you have views that are not the same, like when you have opposing views or opposing results. Like some people found, and make an example, like you review papers on algorithm aversion. I will use this example quite excessively because there's actually an example paper that I uploaded. It's paper 4, I think. So the papers are numerated from 1 to 4, 1 to 7. And it's paper 4, I think. And it is an example. So if you have no idea what literature review paper is or what literature review is done, read paper 4. And it's actually a review about algorithm aversion. So I will use this quite excessively. And they tried to find out what influences how people react to algorithms. Like there's this thing called algorithm aversion where they say people are averse to algorithms. So this means that they would prefer humans even if they know that the humans perform worse than the algorithm, right? So this was the starting point. But of course, a lot of studies came out, and there are also some different findings. Like some people find that age maybe has a positive influence and age has a negative influence. And so people can find other things, then there is a different methodology. And so you have to integrate that, but you have also to critically share the truth on how it came about, how this result came about, and maybe also provide some introspective on how this difference can be explained. So it's more than just describing results, right? And why is this important? So all the things I tell you are not only important for writing a whole literature review paper, but also for positioning your research. Imagine you want to position your research and you find opposing forces. Like you could say, okay, we tried to find out the truth now, really, but you also have to say why were they wrong, or what didn't they look at, right? So, and usually we don't like criticize and say people are wrong, but we say, hey, they might not have looked at this, and we try to incorporate this, and this would be an explanation of why the findings are mixed, and we try to go into one or the other direction. So this could be also a good argument, and then you position your research within this, right? So this is a literature review. So integrate, and also, of course, integrate it. So I have one database, usually an Excel table, to be honest. Like we have Excel table. I even uploaded, I think, a template, and also then to analyze, right? In a quantitative and qualitative literature. Like you can have also for literature review, and we will talk about this in the next lecture when we talk about how we can analyze this. So the first part is we will talk about what type we have, and then how we can integrate the literature, so how we can find the literature. And the second part is how we can actually analyze it. So it's pretty easy. We will talk about two things: getting the literature and analyzing the literature, right? So these are the two parts of the literature. And now you always will hear also in analyzing quantitative and qualitative, and generally these potential methods on how to analyze it together with the integration also load onto the type of literature review that we will do, right? So it's kind of intertwined. This is why we talk about this. So it's integration and analyzing, the state of the art usually. And now you ask yourself, yeah, but what's it so different, so difficult? It kind of is, because this is a research method. Like if you ask yourself why this is important, ask what happens when you miss some important papers. And not saying that this will help you get all papers. Unfortunately not. So none of the methodologies I'm going to show you will help you, but they will justify that you followed a reasonable systematic approach that others can follow. So if you present me with a literature review, I can say, okay, they search these databases, they use these keywords, and then I can say, but these keywords might not be good. Like there are other keywords that also are common in the literature, and I can criticize it, I can help you out, and we have a base of understanding, right? So all these things will unfortunately not lead to you finding all papers. However, it will make sure you get closer to that goal than just doing what's called even actually a narrative review, which we will come to in a second. So goal is to position your research and find what's going on out there. So this is the goal. No matter if you write a whole research, a literature review paper about it, because it's the field might be very large, or if you just use it to position your own research, right? It's quite the same in either way, the methodology, right? And so these are the parts, right? The integration and the quantitative and qualitative approaches to analyze this. And so we will learn how to integrate it systematically. So we talk about a systematic literature review. So this is always used when you write a literature review paper. You always use systematic literature review. If you use it to position your research, right? You should also do that, specifically when you write a PhD or master thesis. Sometimes if you are an expert in the field and the field is very narrow, you also do that basically, but you probably know all the literature already because you're an expert. So what you do is you don't need to do a systematic review because your system is just, you know all this, right? You already done, like you check the literature every time and you know what's going out. But this is where if your field is very narrow, right? For example, the field we talk about, algorithm aversion, human AI interaction, like these fields, or even if you talk about how creative, how humans in creative, this is one of our research topics, how humans in creative positions feel that AI comes in and not steal their jobs, but alters their way of creative co-creation, right? So you have AI now in music, you have it in art, and this alters the way not only the consumer thinks about, but also the artist thinks about it. And you would imagine that this is a small field, but it's actually not. Like, unfortunately, we find articles like almost daily that do the same thing that we want to do, right? And this is very unfortunate, but it shows the importance of doing this, right? If you don't do this and you just say, it will be fine, then you will end up with a product that is literally I can put into the trash can because it has been solved and probably better, right? So what if the study is from management science or a high-ranked journal? They have more money, they have more time, they have more experience than scientists than you are, right? So this is what I'm saying. Like this is why we have to do. So of course you will get help from us in the seminars and so don't worry about it. But you need to find out how to do this, right? This is what we need to teach you. And this is basically what a literature review is, right? Why do we do literature review? I think I've told you enough of that, right? So here again, this is this is the paper. And so literature review is either this section here, so the second section, sorry, or the whole paper is about it, right? And then the results section actually contains the literature review. But again, for the literature review papers that are literature review themselves, I have enough examples so that you know what I mean. So this is why here I focus on this is a so-called research paper structure, right? And now the question is, when we first go into a project, right, into a research project, and now I'm talking about research project that can have one or many papers, or a research project is something like your master thesis. So we want to particularly prepare you for a scientific project, master thesis. This is our goal here, right? We want you to be successful in your course of study. And these are research projects. They are 5 and more months. And actually, a master thesis, if you think it's only the 5 months per register, it's more usually, right? So you get more time to prepare. And what we usually in Orba do, or what we like to do, is to get you on board early. Like try to get you on board with a scientific project. And the scientific project is usually, at least with me, it's a literature review. So I get you on board. So you write a whole literature review so that you become the expert I was just telling you about that actually knows all the literature, can find a nice research gap, and you're already an expert, and then you can like go into the master thesis and know exactly what you do. You might also know how to design it because you've written about experimental designs, or when we go to the Orba, you've written about business analytics tools that have done that. You've already programmed something in the scientific project that you now want to enhance, or you want to upgrade in the master thesis and show how it works, or you want to do a human-based evaluation of your either decision systems when we talk about, or maybe predictive systems when we talk about business analytics. So it doesn't really matter if you do an experiment, if you do an algorithm or whatever, right? It's always pretty similar. And for all of that, you have to gain a knowledge. And this is what we try to do. So we try to build you up and so that you become an expert once you leave here, right? At least we give you the opportunity. Now, and focus is very important. But if you say, hey, I want to be more of a generalist, this is also fine. Like we don't force you to do anything, but spending more time on one topic, having more time, get to know it in a master seminar or in a scientific project, and then doing a specific study like this, that is a specific study and not a literature review, will give you good chances of contributing and having a great master thesis. Like then doing all different kinds of stuff in the scientific in math. So if you do different topics every time, I think this will not benefit you because the methodology will be if you think, yeah, but I wanna learn different methodologies, and you will. You still have like the literature review in the scientific project, and then you will have other methodologies in math thesis. But the topic is the same. So if you change everything, you change the running system, and you should never change a running system, right? But these are just some words of advice when we talk about why we do literature review and how it will benefit you in Orba. Like, I don't want to talk generally. Also, it will benefit you if you do a PhD somewhere else or if you write papers. But I'm honestly not assuming that all of you want to become a professor, right? So, I want to tell you how this can help you in your work. But you think, yeah, why do I have to? Because I know some of you might think, hey, why do I have to do this? Like, I want to become a data scientist. Well, how do you think you will keep up with the methods and papers that come out every day about new algorithms that you as a scientist need to use, or methodology, or data pre-preparation, or like other things like products? Yeah, you need to scan the literature. That's just how it is. It's an ongoing process, right? And you have to do this if you want to be good, if you want to earn more money, if you want to be the one that is special, if you want to be the one that knows all the algorithms, all the tricks, and build up experience, because your experience is the only thing that actually separates, with different cases, only separates you from ChatGPT doing your job nowadays, right? So if you're just a generalist, well, welcome. You're ChatGPT, only that you have a worse user interface because people have to actually talk to you and get your coffee, right? Um, so this is why this also benefits you in the work, right? All right. Now I want to go over this fairly quickly because this is the boring part, the boring theoretical part now. Okay. So what I just want to do is, so there are many types of literature reviews, right? And we're gonna go through some of them, right? So the first of all is kind of a narrative review. The narrative review is just, I want you to translate this to its subjective, right? It's just, I found some papers, I went maybe to Google Scholar, I read something here and something there, and I put it together as I like it. So this might circumvent things like different opinions. I can be opportunistic and selective. So I can use whatever I want to support my arguments and leave out other things. Like this is a narrative review. So we try to avoid this. We also try to avoid this when we do not write the whole paper, because you want to position your research in all of the research area that you are working in. And if there are some opposing views, and maybe views that actually will not help you to convince people, then what you need to do is you need to name these views in the first part and then discuss it with your findings in the discussion part and say, hey, how does this relate to these other views? Right? And how can you make sense of this, of your experiment, of your algorithm? Yeah. So why is your algorithm faster as other people say it shouldn't be? Then you say, hey, we altered the problem, we altered this, so we cannot compare it with these studies. And then you have a nice discussion and people know, oh, okay, for that I cannot use it, or I need to alter this. This is how you do it. But a narrative review doesn't really help you with that. So it's just like, basically in layman's terms, is you Googling stuff and taking a little bit here and a little bit there and just writing whatever you want. And this is what we do not want to do. Like, we want to honestly position this. Also, the biggest problem here is that you leave out papers, and I see this a lot with students, or I have seen this a lot, not with our students because we actually train our students. This is why we do this. That they actually leave out core papers that I know they know, sometimes even because I have sent it to them, and they just leave them out because these papers do exactly what they do. And if they cite the papers, they would basically acknowledge, sometimes they even cite the papers, which is probably, that's not worse, but it's not worse because they actually acknowledge that these papers exist, but they also acknowledge that they have no idea what's in there, or they purposely just say something else is in there, right? Which is also very bad. So we're not gonna do this. By the way, for this learning goal 3, the paper that you want to check out on the types of literature review is our Paré paper, right? And this is paper 3, I think, right? So paper 3 is your paper, and paper 2, I'm sorry for the, I'm sorry that the numbering doesn't follow quite the logic, but it's close, right? So I had the second paper because it's an example. I want you to read an example first, but you can read it from 1 to 7 if you like. You can read it in any order. But the Paré paper, this is paper number 3, will give you an idea on, so this is from the Paré paper, right? So what types of literature reviews are there? This also means if you do a literature review paper, if you write a literature review paper in my scientific project, for example, I want you to say, hey, according to Paré, this is the type I do, why you do it, and then talk me through your methodology, right? So I don't know why I have people coming in my project and still not knowing this, right? So don't forget this, right? This is an ass up your sleeve, right? So an ace, not an ass. I'm sorry. I hope you don't have an ass up your sleeve. I was mixing up German and English, sorry. So you have an ace up your sleeve if you show me, hey, I know these, and you're thinking about what kind of type you can actually do. And there are quite some types. We can also do scientific projects. So it's not only the one type, although this might be the type that we have the most often, um, which actually is not a descriptive review, but the scoping review, right? So the descriptive review I want to leave out because I actually don't really know what it is. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've rarely seen this. Yeah, so I've rarely seen this. So it's what the descriptive review actually is it should be part of a review. So the descriptive review just states statistics about the literature. So for example, it says, hey, this is how often the word analysis was found, or these are the topic areas or the journal areas where it has been found, or this is the years, the publication years. You can see some of the characteristics here. Then you put up a lot of these statistics. So for me, this is always part of a literature review when you write a literature review paper, right? So it's not a real big part and it depends, but some descriptives on, for example, how many publications per year, because it clearly shows a trend. And when you do it with AI, you will see the trend from 2022, it was Spark. So actually, this is rather boring because everybody knows that. But there can be other things like topics could be important, or things that you code yourself. Like I said, some word analysis could be cool. But this is descriptive. So descriptive means I really just totally do total boring stuff and just look at numbers. And for me, this can be really cool, but only as a part of a review. So the descriptive review for me is not its own review, but nowadays is integrated, right? But it just focuses on things like how many papers per year. And you will see in our examples that this descriptive section is always there. Like they always have some descriptives, and it varies how much they have, right? How much or how many of these descriptive charts they have. But so this is not a type of review I would say you can do solo, like because it doesn't. What do you get out of this, right? You just report some statistics, right? So you can use this, but it's only a gateway together with this one, the scoping review, right? The scoping review is really looking at, what directions is the research going, what findings it has, and this one is very important. The scoping review is always like bounded to some kind of research question. So scoping doesn't mean you have to write down everything, right? But you can still guide it with some questions. And this is sometimes not expressed, but otherwise, how would you do it? Like, how are you going to look at everything, right? So, like the nature of research activities, value of undertaking, research gaps in the extant literature. So it's oftentimes to extend research gaps, like, and it helps if you like if you pair certain directions here. This is what extend and range is meant. Like how far does it go? Where does the topic end? Where does the next topic begin? And if I have these two topics, if I have these two questions, like can I build a grid and say there's barely any research in this area, right? I'll give you an example. You have a lot of AI, how humans perceive AI research. There's tons of it. I've done tons of it. Other people have done tons of it. Um, and but there is rarely any like how does daily AI usage affect you long term, right? So of course it's hard because like ChatGPT has only been around for some years. Or how does it alter your decision making? There are some studies already there, and now I'm gonna make it even worse. I'm gonna say, okay, look at people with disabilities. How does AI change their daily lives? How does the AI affect long term their decision behavior, right? Or like their angle on society. Like, for example, do they get even more lonely if they are stigmatized and lonely already? Do they get more lonely? Does it help them to get maybe back if they are stigmatized, and or if they are included in social circles? Does it boost it or does it hinder them? Like, these are interesting research questions that you could do with a scoping review. But the scoping review doesn't mean you look at everything. Like, you say, okay, this is so a scoping review needs also a scope, as funny as it sounds. But you will understand this once we talk about how we do the literature review, right? But it's always important, and this is what I've expressed. Scoping review doesn't mean I look at everything, right? So I have a topic in mind I want to look at. For example, I have two areas I want to connect. For example, AI and people with disability, and then how they perceive it. So I have to express also somehow the perception part, because otherwise what I could get papers that actually design systems for people with disabilities. So we are actually in the field of inclusive human computer interaction, which is another field actually, and might not give me the answers that I want, or I will have to filter out a lot, right? But this is what the scoping review does, right? And this is what you basically and this is what you would do in a literature review paper, most of all, and what you probably will do on the side when you're into a topic. However, the problem of a scoping review that is not done like really focused with search terms and systematic just means you have a plan on how to do it, right? So when I talk about systematic, it's just you have a plan. Like, you follow this plan, you follow a list, and every piece of literature you get according to list you have to read. Like, this is the difference to this descriptive review, or this narrative, sorry, not a descriptive but a narrative review, where you just say I cherry pick some things, right? So this is why this is very bad, because it follows no systematic. I cannot check what you did. I cannot see your systematic makes sense or not, or no sense. I cannot work together with you, right? And this is different. So when we talk about these reviews, so everything but the narrative review is basically a systematic review. Okay. So this was like summarization of prior knowledge. Okay. And now we have some things where we actually look where it's actually not the knowledge that we want to extract, like what did they do, but we have a deeper look at the results, right? So of course also in an area, but here we look specifically into the results section and try to synthesize the results. So that means these studies have to be very similar so that we can compare them. And there are some things that we can do, like there's a meta-analysis and a qualitative systematic review. The meta-analysis is only for quantitative data, right? Quantitative data means I have a lot of, for example, medical studies and I integrate them. Since we don't do that, I will skip this. But this is just for quantitative data, right? So, and we usually don't have that because we're not in the field of natural science or the field of medicine where we have such an abundance of studies. And even I have, for example, to go back here for a second, I have an abundance of studies for algorithm aversion that check if people are worse or not. But the studies are so differently conducted. They ask different variables, they have different outcome variables, how they measure aversion. So for me, it's impossible to have this to compare the designs, right? I can only say, hey, did they get aversion or not? And even then, if I report it, people would ask me, yeah, but under which circumstances, what kind of tasks? And then I can summarize it, but this will rather be what's called a qualitative systematic review where I'm focused on the outcomes like aversion, yes, no, and I try to bring them together with some other variables, but this is of qualitative nature. Like, I try to go from A to B, but it's not like do not have like this every time the same regression that I can integrate or the same tables where I just have to take the numbers, right? So this is qualitative. It tries to explain relationships from outcomes, but um, it's more flexible. But also it's not like I cannot put a regression model on it or something like this. So I really only describe. I can say, for example, um, 2 of my 3 studies found a positive influence of gender on algorithm aversion. This will be part of what a qualitative, as the sentence I write is qualitative in nature. In a meta-analysis, I could write the average coefficient between weight on a twice of a version and age is 2.51. So you see the difference, right? I cannot quantify this. This is just a qualitative sentence I can write about it. Okay. I never understood what this is, right? So what an umbrella review is, I never got. So if you get it, tell me, okay? So I would focus for this kind of data aggregation. This is meta-analysis or qualitative systematic review. Like I think there is no other way. In an umbrella term, it's like what the umbrella review actually does is, I think, it's a review of reviews, right? So, which actually I think is not part of data integration. So it actually uses like either other meta-analysis or other qualitative systematic reviews, and just does a review of reviews, right? As you want to. But the problem is, again, you like the descriptive review. I think it's not great to single it out, right? So if you have a topic, right? If you have a topic, if I give you the task, do a literature review, right? What's the first thing you do? Like if I give you, especially if I give you a topic for a scientific project, you first need to scan the literature. You always have to do this, no matter if my topic is a literature review itself or if it's some research paper you have to write. Like for example, you have to do an experiment. What's the clever first thing you will search for if you do not know if you do not know your way around the topic? What's the first thing you do? You can put it in chat, by the way. This is the interactive part of the lecture now, the only interactive part for today. But yeah, what's the first thing you're searching for? If you do not know, the field of research, based on what I've told you the last hour, what's the first thing you're searching for? What have I told you about for an hour now? What's the first thing you're searching for? Like you can put it in the chat. What's the first thing you are searching for? Overall title. Now, okay, I'm not meaning what you type in. I'm meaning what you are looking for. Past research. Yeah, but what kind of paper are you looking for? Like are you typing in past research? What do you basically type in? Overall title, but what's the title? Like what are you typing in? So you type in your topic, okay, and then what you add to it. I would skim through the available papers on similar topics to get where I would pick up keywords. Yeah, it's not where you stop. Like this is the second step. And where do you get the keywords? Like how do you find the paper? How do you find the papers if you don't know the keywords? Like how would you find the initial papers? Like you have some words, of course. You need to have some words and you probably mean them. And it's pretty easy. You search for literature reviews. I mean, if you haven't gotten this, you also don't search for type of literature. You search for literature reviews. Like, why are we writing literature review articles? Like, we've talked about this for an hour. And if you are new to the field, you are not looking at single papers. You're looking for literature reviews. Literature reviews integrate everything. They integrate the knowledge. So they actually have done the work. If you search for single papers already, if you get to know the topic, that means you get just single papers, but you want to integrate a few. So what you do is you look first for other literature reviews, right? It makes absolute sense. Like what have others done to integrate it? And then you do exactly what Ahmed said. Then you can use the keywords and the directions to look for things specific to your topic, right? Meta-analysis too. Meta-analysis, as I said, is for quantitative data. Like you won't do, like, again, this is quantitative data. We don't have that. Like quantitative meta-analysis means you have medical studies that are all built the same, where you have the same tables just with different numbers. Like meta-analysis is very hard to do. People people sometimes call something a meta-analysis, but actually mean literature review, like scoping review. And this is where you have to be careful. But I also provided you with something. I'm going to skip a little here. Don't worry, we'll go back in a second. This is called here. You have this table. This is also copied from the Paré paper where you have the label, right? And the label is sometimes what's it called and what actually is meant and what actually can what kind of appraisal, synthesis, and analysis it has. So you can understand what a meta-analysis actually should be. And where you can, I mean, there are some examples where I can actually use a meta-analysis. So it's not that it can't be done, but I haven't come upon like a field in my field where it's actually applicable, where you get enough same structure. Because if you have differences in how they did it, then you already have a problem because you compare, as we say, apples to pears, right? And this cannot happen. So here the explanation building is pretty simple. So here we actually try to build either build a theory or at least either for the realist review, we try to build an explanation from the literature. So we observe it. So this is actually pretty cool. So this means that we observe something as we would for a research, and then we try to find an explanation from the literature, right? So we try to find theories or other things and synthesize these to explain the phenomenon. Like we say, okay, according to this theory and together with this theory, this could be because, well, what we just said, right? This is hard to do, right? This is very hard to do. And I'm not sure if it's really accepted nowadays without empirical evidence, and it's very broad. But what I can tell you, what we usually do is you can get for the theoretical review, what you can have is like you can come up with some taxonomies and frameworks, right? So taxonomies and frameworks that have at least have a relation of some elements, how they get together, right? And so you have the realist review that actually tries to explain things, right? So this is really now we've come from we want to integrate knowledge and analyze the integration of knowledge. Then we want to integrate knowledge to explain a certain specific phenomenon, right? So we're not looking at what's going on in the research, but we actually have a question that we try to answer with what's going on in the research, right? So this is a whole nother direction. This is a whole nother direction. This is why also this is not really our field in Orba, right? So this is actually not what we do. So we usually just try to position our research and then invent some cool ass algorithm, right? So to be very picturesque, but yeah, so this is more for this could also be done in information systems, which I do a lot, but I haven't really come around doing this because it's pretty hard and it's not a really accepted method, but there are some cool example of papers that do that. But I'm not sure if they are accepted because these are well-known researchers who are believed, or if this really the method they accepted, right? You know what I mean? Like this is like people with a lot of if four people that are like gurus in the field tell you something, they're probably right. So and yeah, the critical an important thing, however, for me is the so-called critical review. And this is something you can also do. And sometimes this is a really cool thing. And this gets also published because it has kind of overshadowed the normal scoping review because people find scoping reviews too bored because the scoping reviews tend to be very descriptive. Remember the descriptive part where I said we have statistics, but you can also be very descriptive in the things you report, right? So if you don't infer something of it, which is actually what we do in the explanation building. So they actually want something of everything, but they don't want a specific question answered, but they want to infer something from a general framework like a taxonomy or something. And the critical review, what it does is it looks through the literature, but with the only difference is you're not as open to it, but you actually have a list of criterias, maybe 2 or 3 criterias, where you say, okay, we're gonna look at the literature and we're gonna look at the general theory that we have, like how are things built, what, for example, what kind of processes are there, and then you look into the and then you want to see, hey, we know what general kind of processes are there. And now we want to look at the digitalization, right? AI, the influence of AI on digitalization, and see, hey, how does it change processes? And so your first criteria is what kind of processes have been changed by AI. And then you can look and have this critical review and say, hey, I have this catalog and can look at the paper. So again, this is also not like very scoping, but you have this criteria, right? You work it up against the criteria. It could also be that you have real criteria when you look at algorithms, like how good, how well they perform. Um, did they look at inference times, for example? Then you can compare it to your research, right? So this is also pretty cool. So critical does not mean to criticize. This is very important. Like if you forget everything, this you need to know. It's not to criticize, but to have a critical view. Um, with some criteria. How is the criteria decided? In other words, why would the criteria be accepted by the community? Oh yeah, so the criteria, as I said, is usually derived from either it's a very logical thing, like for example, in the OR, you could just have like things like performance indicators that are known, right? So you have some criteria or some criteria like is it explainable, right? So what about explainability? Do they talk about explainability? And then what you do is like you derive it, and how it's accepted is you cite things, right? You relate it to other literatures. But what I'm trying to say is it's different. So the thing where you derive it from is always more general, right? So you have heard of tons of explainable AI and stuff. And if I want to like look about explainable reinforcement learning, I can use this general criteria of explainability and look how it is dealt with in the literature, right? So people will accept this general notion of explainability, although it hasn't been so popular in the other field, or it's not been talked about, or there is no literature review. This is why you do your job. Like the criteria is accepted by the community because you back it up with a lot of literature where people have spoken about this criteria, not as a criteria, but as a theoretical thing, or have done other things, right? So of course you have to back it up, right? If it's then accepted, right? It doesn't even then, right? But the chances are good if you can back it up and it's a fairly known thing that you can use it as a criteria. However, if it's accepted, or it's not always accepted, like people would say, why did you choose this criteria? It also have to make sense, right? It's not only about being accepted because you have a lot of literature behind it, right? In this in the parentheses, as I showed you, but also it has to make sense from a story, right? So why did you choose this criteria? How does this criteria bring you forward? If you want to know more, I like the question. If you want to know more about this, please read paper 6. This is an excellent critical literature review on actually processes in digitalization processes, which is a very cool topic. Like this is a topic everybody should know about. And so I encourage you to read this paper. They have 3 criteria, right? For example, they talk about processes. And one of the criteria, which this is a criteria that makes sense, right? So one of the criteria that makes sense is like the time. Because a process, as you know, is like over time. So how do they reflect on time? How do they deal with the time dimension when they have the process, which is very important. There are very different ways on doing this. They ask themselves in digitalization, how do they deal with that, right? And this will be like accepted because time and process, like nobody will say time is not important in the process, right? And other criteria that is more derived, which is not very, the first is like what type of processes, but then they have like this taxonomy of process types that is fairly accepted in the literature, right? So there you can see, I think if you read till page 4 or 5, I think in the methodology section they have these 3 criteria. And if you only read this, it's half a page, I would suggest you read that. if you're very interesting, right after the lecture and you will know. Okay, perfect. So these are the types. You also hear this table is pretty cool. You should read this table. And so what you can see here also, like what kind of review types this is, what's the scope. Like you can see broad, broad, broad. And of course, a meta-analysis needs to be very narrow because it cannot be broad because it only targets specific types of studies and also the qualitative review. So the qualitative review and the meta-analysis, they need to observe the same outcome variable somehow to see what kind of influence things have. So they can only select papers here. A scoping review on algorithm inversion could have any kind of study of an algorithm inversion, like even studies that don't even talk about algorithm inversion as an output variable, but just say, hey, what kind of, how is it defined? What kind of decisions is made? How does algorithm inversion as an input variable reflect on other things will also be in here. But here you need a specific input-output pair to even do that, right? Okay, and here realist review also narrow. Why? Because you have one question in mind that you need to explain, right? The critical review is also broad, but it uses criteria, right? It looks at all the literature, but it has a criteria. So the things you look at is somewhat limited, right? Which makes this really nice. But as Ahmed said, you need to like define the criteria. They have to be accepted. They need to be well derived, right? So this is a problem. And here you have some terms also that are used usually like critical review, literature review, overview, and so on. So these are just terms that are used and put around so that you have some terms here. Okay. So if you want to check up on this whole thing, like you read the Paré paper. Okay, you have to read it anyway, might as well do it. Okay, so here I want to stop for today. Okay, here I want to stop for today. Very important. Let me go. So this is what we will talk about. So this is all at one example paper where I will just show you how they did it, right? So this is paper 4. So don't be like don't be like flushed or anything. This is just one example. Also some practical cool guidelines. Here we will do this live. I will show you how to search, what can happen if you don't do this. We will all do this next time. So the important thing is this is the literature list, like. And what I want you to do is I want to read them. Like reading doesn't mean you have to like inhale them, right? So the Kitchenham paper first gives you an idea on what a literature review is and what the methodology is. Why is this important? Because next time we will talk about how to do it, right? Today we talked about what it is, blah, blah, blah. Next time we will talk about how to do it. So how to choose the keywords and so on. So a lot of things that you tried to answer today, and I could see from the answers it was well meant, but we will need to fix it a little bit. Okay, what is an SR? So this is an example. Like this is an example of a qualitative systematic review. And then the Paré paper is paper 3. So the Paré paper you can fly over because I think we've covered this quite broadly today. So I would say give less attention to that paper and more attention maybe to this example, right? And the Kitchenham for next. And then the read 4 is the example that we will extensively cover. So you either can choose to read it beforehand to get a better understanding and be well prepared for the next lecture, or you can just let me explain it, kind of, right? Because this we will use. But if you understand what it's about, then it will be better for you. And then we have some other. So this one, read 5, is from Professor Neufeld. It's a great literature review, but it's another type of review. It's not another type. It's also scoping review, but it's you can see how different they can be, right? So this is almost analytical and very narrow to one specific thing, and this is almost like this could also be a qualitative review of some sort, a qualitative integrative review, not a meta-analysis, but it's for a very narrow problem. But I'm not sure if this could be like, I would say it's a scoping, but could also be the other thing. So you could read this, or you can have a look at this and say, hey, how can it be done when I have a more narrow topic? What can I bring out of it? Because next time we also will talk about how to analyze it, right? And as I said, the read 6 is the critical review, right? You can also have a look at this. So this I would fly over, only look at the criteria, but again, how deep you read these, like we will not ask about the content, like the contents of these examples. Like I will not ask about processes, or I will not ask about what factors influence algorithm version. Here's all about the methodology and how the literature reviews has been done. So I will ask you about this, but in a general way, and I will not ask you how did Wiener et al. Did the literature review, right? So don't worry about that. It will not be part of the exam. And method 7 is a nice method of content analysis. This is kind of a bonus, like it's a must read. You have to read it, but this is kind of a bonus. I really like this. Like, how can you analyze a literature review? How can you, in a scoping review, how can you extract content when you have no criteria as in a critical review, right? So how can you deal in a scoping review? What do you look at? Because this is the question that you probably have in mind when you say, hey, in a critical review, I know, but how do I do this? Well, here's your answer. Okay, so I want to thank you so much. Now I have taken 90 minutes, right? It was clear from the beginning, but I promised you 60 minutes and I failed, so sorry for that. I hope you enjoyed it still. I want you to read these articles until October 30. Next week is no lecture. Next week you read, okay? You use it for reading, and then I will see you back on October 30, and then we will talk about the specifics and some practical guidelines, okay? Thank you so much for joining, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask right now. Thank you so much.